History does not live in dates and names alone. It breathes in stories. In the footsteps of travelers, the echo of markets, the silence of palaces where rulers once sat. Some empires pass quietly, leaving only dust. Others leave monuments so luminous they seem to defy time itself. The Mughal Empire is one of these. For more than 3 centuries, emperors from Central Asia ruled the Indian subcontinent. They built cities that glowed with marble and sandstone, fostered art and poetry that shimmered like jewels and shaped a culture still felt today. But their story is not one of endless triumph. It is a tale of longing, of power, both glorious and fragile, of emperors who loved deeply, ruled sternly, or lost themselves in indulgence. From Babur, who founded the dynasty almost reluctantly, to Bahadur Shah Zafar, who ended it in sorrow and exile, the Mughals remind us that empires, no matter how mighty, are but dreams. So let us walk through their worlds slowly, as if wandering through an old garden at dusk. Let us pause at each emperor's reign, listening for whispers in the wind, the soft voices of history that still linger in marble and sand. Chapter 1. Babur, the reluctant founder. High in the valleys of Central Asia, where rivers run cold and mountains rise like guardians of the sky, a boy named Zahir-ud-Din Muhammad Babur was born in 1483. His bloodline was as heavy as it was noble. From his father's side he traced descent to Timur, the great conqueror of Samarkand, from his mother's to the world-shaking Genghis Khan. It was a heritage of ambition, but also a burden. At 11, Babur inherited the small kingdom of Fergana. He was little more than a boy, but rivals already circled him like hawks. He dreamed of Samarkand, the city of turquoise domes and bustling markets, the jewel of Central Asia. He won it once, only to lose it again. Fortune gave, fortune took, and Babur wandered, often exiled, often betrayed. Through it all, he was not only a soldier. Babur was a poet, a dreamer. In his memoir, the Baburnama, he wrote with tender honesty about the world around him. He described flowers and birds, mountains and rivers. He confessed his loves, his fears, his weaknesses. He longed for Kabul, a city he captured and adored, where he built gardens filled with flowing water and blooming fruit trees. But India was different. When he crossed into Hindustan, he found the land strange. The air is heavy, the rivers are muddy, the fruits strange, he wrote. Yet, destiny pulled him there. In 1526, Babur marched with just 12,000 men to face Ibrahim Lodi, the Sultan of Delhi, who commanded an army more than 3 times larger, with elephants armored for war. On the plain of Panipat, the two forces clashed. Babur brought cannons, a new terror to Indian battlefields. The thunder of gunpowder shook the earth. Elephants panicked, soldiers scattered. By day's end, Ibrahim Lodi was dead, and Delhi lay open. Babur had not come to be a settler, but fate made him one. He became the founder of a new dynasty, the Mughals, named for their Mongol heritage. In his brief 4 years as emperor, he built gardens in Agra, sought to shape India to his taste, and yet never stopped longing for Kabul. When he died in 1530, he asked to be buried there, far from the plains of Hindustan. His empire was fragile, uncertain, but a seed had been planted, one that would grow into one of the greatest empires in the world. Chapter 2. Humayun, the Wandering Star. Babur's son Humayun inherited the throne at 22. His name meant fortunate, but fortune often mocked him. Humayun was gentle, mystical, a man who consulted the stars before he made decisions. He divided his inheritance among his brothers, hoping to keep peace. But in dynasties, brothers rarely remain brothers for long. They become rivals, each dreaming of the throne. Soon, a formidable enemy appeared, Sher Shah Suri, an Afghan general whose brilliance in war outmatched Humayun's. Battle after battle, Humayun faltered. In 1540, he lost Delhi. So began his exile, an emperor without an empire. For 15 years he wandered across deserts, seeking allies often betrayed. He fled to Persia, where the Safavid Shah welcomed him. There, Humayun was treated with dignity, clothed in robes of honor and given troops. In return, he absorbed Persian culture, from architecture to miniature art, gifts he would one day pass to his son. At last, in 1555, Humayun returned. With Persian support, he defeated his enemies and reclaimed Delhi. Imagine his relief, after years of wandering, to stand once more in his capital. Yet fate was cruel. The very next year, while descending the stairs of his library, arms full of books, he tripped, struck his head, and died. His reign was short and troubled, but Humayun left behind something far greater than victories, a son whose brilliance would outshine them all. Akbar, the boy who would become a legend. Chapter 3. Akbar the Great. Akbar was only 13 when the crown fell upon his head. The empire was in peril. Enemies circled and rebellions smoldered. At the Second Battle of Panipat, his regent Bayram Khan secured victory, but the boy emperor's destiny had only begun. As Akbar grew, so did his empire. He conquered Gujarat, Bengal, Rajasthan, and the Deccan until Mughal rule stretched across most of India. He was fearless in battle, often riding at the front lines. But conquest was not his true greatness. Akbar hungered not only for land but for knowledge. In the palace of Fatehpur Sikri, he built the Ibadat Khana, the house of worship. There, by candlelight, he gathered Hindu pandits, Muslim scholars, Christian priests, Jain monks, Zoroastrian priests. They debated under his watch, their words filling the night with questions of God and truth. Akbar listened, questioned, reflected. He abolished the jizya tax on non-Muslims. He married Rajput princesses, honoring their traditions. He dreamed of harmony, even creating a new faith, the Din-e-Ilahi, blending ideas from many religions. Few followed it, but it showed the vastness of his mind. Akbar reformed the empire. His Mansabdari system ranked nobles by merit. His finance minister, Todar Mal, made revenue collection fairer, lightening burdens on farmers. Roads stretched across the empire, guarded by watchmen. Markets thrived, filled with silks, spices, and jewels. Merchants from Persia and Europe came to marvel at India's wealth. Culturally, his reign was golden. Painters filled manuscripts with jewel-like miniatures. Poets flourished. Architecture soared. Palaces and mosques with domes and arches. Fatehpur Sikri, though abandoned later, remains a monument to his vision. Red sandstone halls, vast courtyards, gateways like giant doorways to heaven. When Akbar died in 1605, his people mourned as if they had lost a father. To this day, he is remembered simply as Akbar the Great, the emperor who dreamed of unity. Chapter 4. Jahangir, the lover of justice. Akbar's son Jahangir, Caesar of the world, was gentler than his father. He loved gardens, wine, and above all, justice. To symbolize fairness, he hung a golden chain outside his palace. Anyone, rich or poor, could pull it, and the emperor himself would listen. Jahangir's reign blossomed with art. Mughal painting reached its height, capturing delicate details of flowers, birds, and royal hunts. His court glowed with refinement. But his reign was also shaped by a remarkable woman, Nur Jahan, his wife. Intelligent and ambitious, she issued orders, commanded armies, and even had coins struck in her name. Their partnership was rare for its time, a shared rule of elegance and strength. Jahangir welcomed Europeans, granting trade privileges to the English. They came as traders, carrying cloth and silver, not yet conquerors. But the seeds of their future power were planted in his court. His later years were troubled by illness and rebellion. Yet his legacy is remembered in beauty and fairness, in gardens where fountains flowed, and in the delicate paintings that still dazzle the eye. Chapter 5. Shah Jahan, the King of Marble. Shah Jahan's reign was the empire's golden dawn. His Delhi glittered with wealth, wide avenues, bustling bazaars, perfumed gardens. Nobles wore silks heavy with gold embroidery. Jewelers shaped emeralds and rubies into ornaments that gleamed in the sun. He built the Red Fort, its walls rising strong and majestic. He built the Jama Masjid, vast enough for thousands to pray. But above all, he built the Taj Mahal, a love story in stone. When his wife, Mumtaz Mahal, died giving birth to their 14th child, Shah Jahan's grief was unendurable. Out of it rose the Taj Mahal, a mausoleum of white marble inlaid with gems. 20,000 workers labored for 20 years, bringing marble from Makrana, turquoise from Tibet, lapis from Afghanistan, and jasper from Punjab. In moonlight, it shimmered like a dream. Poets called it a teardrop on the cheek of time. But behind the marble glow lay burdens. Endless wars in the Deccan drained the treasury. Heavy taxes pressed on peasants. And within his family, ambition grew sharp. At last, his son Aurangzeb seized power. Shah Jahan was imprisoned in Agra Fort. From his chamber window, he gazed across the river at the Taj Mahal, the tomb of his beloved, until death reunited them. Chapter 6. Aurangzeb, the stern emperor. Aurangzeb ruled for nearly 50 years, the longest of the Mughal emperors. His reign was stern, pious, relentless. He rejected luxury, banned music at court, and lived simply. He stitched prayer caps with his own hands, saying their sale would pay for his burial. Yet he was ambitious in power. He expanded the empire to its greatest size, conquering the Deccan, but his policies strained unity. He reinstated the jizya tax on non-Muslims, destroyed some temples, and enforced strict Islamic law. To his supporters, he was a defender of the faith. To his critics, he was a ruler whose rigidity fractured harmony. Rebellions spread. The Marathas under Shivaji fought with guerrilla brilliance. The Sikhs resisted fiercely. Rajputs defied him. His empire grew vast but brittle, like glass, too finely made. When he died in 1707, Aurangzeb confessed his weariness. "I came alone and I go as a stranger. I do not know who I am or what I have been doing." His death marked the beginning of decline. Chapter 7. The Long Decline. After Aurangzeb, the Mughal throne became fragile. Emperors came and went, many mere puppets of powerful nobles. In 1739, disaster struck. Nadir Shah of Persia invaded Delhi. His soldiers slaughtered thousands. He carried away treasures that stunned the world: the peacock throne, the Koh-i-Noor diamond. Delhi never recovered. Later, Ahmad Shah Abdali raided repeatedly, leaving Delhi broken. Meanwhile, new powers rose: the Marathas, the Sikhs, and most fatefully, the British East India Company. The emperor remained in Delhi, but his power shrank to the palace walls. Yet even in decline, culture bloomed. Delhi became a city of poets. Ghazals were sung in candlelit gatherings, mourning a fading world. Chapter 8. Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal. The final emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was not a conqueror, but a poet. His court was filled with music and verse, but his power was a shadow. In 1857, Indian soldiers rose in rebellion against British rule. They turned to Zafar as a symbol. Old and frail, he became the figurehead of the revolt. For a moment, the Mughal flame flickered again, but the British crushed the uprising with brutal force. Delhi was ravaged, its people massacred. Zafar was captured, tried, and exiled to Rangoon. There, far from the Yamuna River, he died in 1862, whispering poems of longing. His last words captured the sorrow of the end. I asked for a life of 4 days. The first Muslim invaders of India were the Arabs. In waiting. There, with activities, the dynasty were practically confined to the lower Indus regions. Gone. The Mughals live on in marble and the outer fringe of the Indian political life still glows white under the moon. The red fort their occupation of Sindh was only an episode of Kashmir, still murmur with Indian history, full of poetry still sings, but not empires rise and fall, but their dreams seriously the political and economic remind us that power fades, but the movement of the Ghaznavides and the Ghurids. So as you close your eyes, imagine the reaching effect. Babur dreaming of Kabul, completely Humayun lost among the stars. Political map Akbar listening to debates. Jahangir's chain of justice trembling. Shah Jahan warned themselves into the heart of India. Aurangzeb stitching cap assumed Zafar the whispering poetry in exile. Hindu empire is gone. Builders like Chandragupta remains. Samudragupta, soft and even as a lullaby, the sovereign power passed into the hands of the Muslim sultan who exercised it according to his light and the circumstances of the time. In 1526, the Mughal Empire was established in India by Babur, who is regarded as most attractive personality in all history. Most of his life spent outside India, but conquered most of places and established the Mughal rule. Flora A. Steele writes, about Babur, it would be sheer perversity to treat him solely in reference to the part he played in India, as this would be to deprive ourselves of no less than 36 years of the very best of company. The life of Babur can be categorized into different periods. 1. Early adventures up to his conquest of Kabul, 1494 to 1505. 2. Babur as king of Kabul, 1504 to 25. And 3. Babur in India, 1525 to -- 30. India was always renamed weak whenever the external invaders invaded India. There are so many reasons. Sporadic population living in different parts of India with their diverse culture, language, religious faith. And that is why there were small kings with a small territory who did not have any effective means of communication with each other. They do not have any collective planning to save this vast country, and due to these reasons, Babur invents India and established Mughal emperor. The Mughals were very much rich so far as arms, technology, and their political machineries are concerned. So the Indian native kings were early defeated and overpowered with their method of warfare. The Mughals were physically better as compared to Indians, and they had unity as they follow one religion, i.e. Islam, as compared to Indians who have many goddesses. Babur, Humayun, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb, and all later Mughals were ruled according to their ability and wisdom and will. Initially, they stay in northern part of India due to good and favorable climatic condition, but gradually step over other parts of this country. During Aurangzeb time, the Mughal Empire reached its zenith when apparently almost the whole of India was within his empire. Babur turned to India when his repeated attempts to gain power in his Central Asian homeland and failed, but eventually a discontented faction at the Lodi court in Delhi invited him to intervents. He defeated the Sultan Ibrahim II at Panipat in 1526, and in the next year the Rajput chiefs at Kanwa near Agra. Yet, these victories were only a beginning. There was a yet no solid structure of Mughal power, and the reaction of the Afghan chiefs, led by Sher Shah Suri, caused Babur's son Humayun to flee from northern India to Singh and then to Afghanistan for 15 years. Only the weakness of Sher Shah's successors allowed Humayun to return in 1555 and established himself in Delhi and Agra. During Bariam Khan's regency, the territories of the Mughal Empire had been expanded, apart from Ajmer, the most important. Conquests during this period had been that of Malwa and Garh. Katanga, Malwa, was being ruled at that time by a young prince, Baz Bahadur. His accomplishments included a mastery of music and poetry, stories about the romance of Baz Bahadur, and Rupmati, who was famous for her beauty as well as for music and poetry, are well known. During his time, Mandu had become a celebrated center for music. The army, however, had been neglected by Baz Bahadur. The expedition against Malwas, led by Adham Kha, son of Akbar's foster mother, Maham Anaga. Baz Bahadur was badly defeated 1561, and the Mughals took valuable spoils, including Rupmati. However, she preferred to commit suicide to being dragged to Adam Khan's harem. Due to the snezzeless cruelties of Adam Khan and his successor, there was a reaction against Tili Mughals. W.L. Vikti enabled Baz Bahadur to recover Malwa. After dealing with Bairam Ktian's rebellion, Akbar sent another expedition to Ilalwa. Baz Bahadur had to flee, and for some time he took shelter with the Rama of Ivlewa. After wander about from one area to another, he finally repaired to Akbar's court and was enrolled as a Mughal Mansabdar. The extensive country of Malwas thus came under Mughal rule. When Akbar had dealt with the rebellion of the Uzbek nobles, he forced Asaf Khan to scourge his illegal gain. He restored the kingdom of Garh Katanga to Chandra Shah, the younger son of Sangram Shah, after taking 10 forts to round off the kingdom of Malwa. During the next 10 years, Akbar brought the major part of Rajasthan under his control and also conquered Gujarat and Bengal. A major step in his campaign against the Rajput states was the siege of Chittor. This redoubtable fortress, which had faced a number of sieges in its history, was considered a key to central Rajasthan. One of the most important problems facing Akbar was the system of land revenue administration. Sher Shah had instituted a system by which the cultivated area was measured and a central schedule, Ray, was drawn up, fixing the dues of the peasant crop. Wise on the basis of the productivity of land, this schedule was converted every year into a central schedule of prices. Akbar adopted Sher Shah's system, but it was soon found that the fixing of central schedule of prices often led to considerable delays and resulted in great hardship to the peasantry, since the prices fixed were generally those prevailing at the imperial court, and thus were higher than in the countryside. The peasants had to part with a large share of their produce. Akbar therefore reverted to a system of annual assessment. The Kanungos, who were hereditary holders of land as well as local officials conversant with local conditions, were ordered to report on the actual produce, state of cultivation, local prices, etc. A number of other systems of assessment were also followed under Akbar. The most common and perhaps the oldest was called Batai or Galabakshi. In this system, the produce was divided between the peasants and the state in fixed proportion. A third system which was widely used in Akbar's time was nasak. It seems that it meant a rough calculation of the amount payable by the peasant on the basis of what he had been paying in the past. Other local methods of assessment also continued in some areas. Akbar was deeply interested in the improvement and extension of cultivation. He asked Amil to act like a father to the peasants. He was to advance money by was of loans, takav, to the peasants for seeds, implements, animals, etc. in times of need, and to recover them in easy installments. Hardly any changes were made by Akbar in the organization of local government. The Pargana and the Sarkar continued as before. The chief officers of the Sarkar were the Fajudar and the Amalguzar, the former being in charge of law and order, and the latter responsible for the assessment and collection of the land. Revenue. The territories of the empire were divided into Jagir, Khalisa, and Inam. Income from Khalisa villages went directly to the royal exchequer. The Inam lands were those which were allotted to learned and religious men. Jagirs were allotted to nobles and members of the royal family, including the queens. The Amalguzar was required to exercise a general supervision over all types of holdings, so that the imperial rules and regulations for the assessment and collection land revenue were followed uniformly. Only autonomous rajas were left free to continue their traditional land revenue system in their territories. Even there, Akbar encouraged them to follow the imperial system. Akbar paid great attention to the organization of the central and provincial governments. His system of central government was based on the structure of government which had evolved under the Delhi Sultanate, but the functions of the various departments were carefully organized and meticulous rules and regulations were laid down for the conduct of affairs. Thus, he gave a new shape to the system and breathed new life into it. Akbar's relations with the Rajputs have to be seen against the wide background of Mughal policy towards the powerful Rajas and Zamindars of the country. The Rajput policy of Akbar proved beneficial to the Mughal state as well as to the Rajputs. Its alliance secured to the Mughal Empire the services of the bravest warriors in India. The steadfast loyalty of the Rajputs became an important factor in the consolidation and expansion of the empire. The alliance ensured peace in Rajasthan and enabled the Rajputs to serve in far-flung part of the empire without worrying about the safety of their homeland. Akbar's Rajput policy was continued by his successors, Jahangir and Shah Jahan. Jahangir, whose mother was a Rajput. Princes had himself a Kachawaha princess, as well as a Jodhpur. Princess Akbar Alos revised the education syllabus, laying more emphasis on moral education and mathematics, and on secular subjects such as agriculture, geometry, astronomy, rules of government, logic, history, etc. He also gave patronage to artists, poets, painters, and musicians, so much so that his court became famous for the galaxy of famous Pepuipi there, or the Navaratna. Thus, under Akbar, the state became essentially secular, liberand, enlightened in social matters, and a promoter of cultural integration. The 50 years' reign of Akbar the Great now followed. The Mughal hold on northern and central India was made firm, Malwa, and the independent Rajput states, Gujarat and Khandesh, were secured, and by 1576, Bengal was restored once more to the control of Delhi, the northwestern frontier gateway to India, for so many invaders was secured by the acquisition of Kabul and Kandahar, although the latter town was to be a bone of contention. With the Persians for a long time to come, in the Deccan, the northern tier of the successor states to the Bahmanids were either directly annexed or made to acknowledge Akbar's supremacy, but the military and administrative control of the Mughals was not yet strong enough for full authority to be exercised there. This was to be the work of Aurangzeb. On the diplomat level, the initially friendly relations with the Safavids were exchanged for an agreement with the Ozbek Abdullah Khan over the demarcation of respective territories. There was also contact with the Ottomans over the common threat from the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean, but the distance between Delhi and Istanbul were too vast for a Sunni Grand Alliance to emerge. Akbar was thus undeniably a great general and statesman, but he is perhaps more interesting as a thinker and religious reformer. This syncretistic Din-Lillahi shows his deep intellectual curiosity about religion in general. Hindus participated to a greater extent than usual in the administration and direction of the empire. It was under Akbar that the governmental system of the empire took shape, and he welded together into a ruling class. Diverse ethnic elements comprising Turks, Afghans, Persians, and Hindus. This class formed the Mansabdaris, holders of official appointments, who were obliged to provide a certain number of troops. Official salaries were in part paid by jagirs or land grants, which were not, however, hereditary like the iotas of the Islamic lands further west. Although the ruler himself had theoretically unbridled secular authority, the early Mughals at least were benevolent rather than tyrannical despots. Moreover, the very vastness of the empire inhibited over-centralization. Akbar's successors, Jahangir and Shah Jahan, continued the policy of enforcing obedience over outlying parts over the Rajputs of Mewar, the Shiz sultanates of Deccan, the Portuguese on the coast of Bengal, but Shah Jahan's ambitions of uniting Central Asia and India in a ground Sunni empire only ended in failure and loss of prestige. In a savage succession war after Shah Jahan's death, Aurangzeb twice defeated his brother Dara Shikoh and began a 50 years reign. He broke with the liberal and eclectic traditions of his predecessors. He attacked social and religious practices which had grown up in Muslim India under the all-pervading influence of the surrounding Hindu majority society, attempting a reformation at one of the lines enunciated in the 18th century by Shah Wali Allah of Delhi. In part, Aurangzeb's policy was a reaction against the renewed giver, intellectual and material of the Hinduism, yet the continued to let Hindus form an integral part of the Mughal military and administrative structure. His military efforts were at first directed at strengthening the northwestern frontier, where fierce fighting was necessary to assert control over the Pathans. Latterly, he became increasingly concerned over the Deccan, the remaining Shah sultanates were completely extinguished and the Marathas checked. Yet this last success was only temporary, and the higher point of Muslim influence in the Deccan under Aurangzeb was never to be reached again. Aurangzeb's death in 1707 began the agonizing decline of the Mughals. A series of ephemeral rulers was raised to power, whilst the outlying provinces of the empire fell into the hands of such groups as the Marthas, Fats, Sikhs, and Rohilla Afghans. Nadir Shah's invasion of India in 1738-39 and the occupation of Delhi, and the subsequent campaigns of Ahmad Shah Durrani dealt the empire material and moral blows from which it never recovered on. All sides' Hindu fortunes were reviving, and the factor of the English was now significant in the interior of the subcontinent as well as in the coastlands, whilst the English were extending there power through Bengal to Oudh, central India, and Rajputana. The Mughals in Delhi could only look on helplessly. Shah Alam was an English pensioner, and in 1858 the last Mughal was deposed and exiled for complicity in the Indian Mutiny. Centralized administration organized on systematic line was a notable feature of the Mughal Empire. Very largely, it was a creation of Akbar, 1963 to 1014/1556 to 1605. At the center, the emperor appointed ministers such as the Wakil, whose office after Baizam Khan died 967-1560, became largely titular and was often unoccupied. The Diwan La'aya, or head of the revenue and finance department, came to be the most important minister. He controlled revenues realized in the emperor's personal domain, Khalisa, determined the assessment figures, Jama, on Leos basis, Jagirs, were assigned, and was in charge of payment of all expenditure, including cash salaries. He issued instructions to his subordinates, called Diwans in the provinces, Subas. The Mir Bakshi was in charge of grants of mansabs, salary, determining ranks, upkeep of the army and the intelligence service. He had his own subordinates, Bakshis, in the Subas. The Sardar at Sudur was in charge of appointments of judicial officers and charity grants, again with subordinates called Sardars, pasted in each Suba. Akbar divided the empire into Subas, each having a governor. Sipasola, Sahib al-Suba, Nazim, appointed by the emperor. The governor's powers were greatly restricted by other officers, the Diwan, the Bakshi, and the Sardar, who were directly subordinate only to the respective ministers at the center. Each Suba was divided into Sarkars, maintained largely for territorial identification. Faujdars maintained law and order over areas which did not necessarily coincide with Sarkar's reach. Sarkars was divided among Parganas, each having a Muslim judge, Qadi, and two semi-hereditary officials called Kanungo and Chowdari, who were concerned with tax collection. The holders of mansabs, or mansabators, of the Mughal Empire received their pay either in cash or in from assignments or areas of lands from which they were entitled to. Collect the land revenue and all other taxes imposed or sanctioned by the emperor. These assignments were known as dras, though sometimes the term kulta, used by the Delhi sultans, who also employed land which was reserved for the income of the crown, was called Khalisa, and such areas which were due to be assigned but were for the time being managed by imperial officers were known as pavbaki. Territories assigned in lieu of the salary due to a mansabdar were termed jagirs, or more precisely, Tanksh WR Jagirs. The Mughal rulers consolidated the administrative system which had developed under Akbar, Jahangir 1605-27, and Shah Jahan 1628-58 maintained the alliance with the Rajputs and tried to further broaden the political base of the empire by allying with powerful sections such as the Afghans and Marathas. They embellished their capitals with beautiful buildings, many of them in marble, and tried to make the Mughal court the center of the cultural life in the country, the Mughals played a positive role in establishing India's relations with neighboring Asian powers such as Iran, the Uzbeks, and the Ottoman Turks, thereby opening up greater avenues for India's foreign trade. Trade concessions given to various European trading companies were also aimed at promoting India's foreign trade, but a number of negative features came to the surface during the period. The growing prosperity of the ruling classes did not filter down to peasants and workers. The Mughal ruling class remained oblivious of the growth of science and technology in the West. The problem of succession to the throne created instability, thus posing a threat to the political system as well as to the economic and cultural development. Jahangir, the eldest son of Akbar, succeeded to the throne without any difficulty, his younger brothers having died during the lifetime of Akbar due to excessive drinking. However, shortly after Jahangir's succession, his eldest son, Khusrau, broke out into rebellion. Tussle between father and son for the throne was not unusual in those times. Jahangir himself had rebelled against his father and kept the empire disturbed for some time. However, Khusrau's rebellion proved to be short-lived. Jahangir defeated him at a battle near Lahore, and soon afterwards he was captured and imprisoned. Like Akbar, Jahangir realized that conquest could be lasting, on the basis not of force but of securing the goodwill of the people. He therefore treated the defeated Afghan chiefs and their followers with consideration and sympathy. After some time, many of the princes and zamindars of Bengal, detained at the court, were released and allowed to return to Bengal. Even Musa Khan was released, and his estates were restored. Thus, after a long spell, peace and prosperity returned to Bengal. To cap the process, the Afghan also now began to be inducted into the Mughal nobility. The leading Afghan noble under Jahangir was Khan Jahan Lodi, who rendered distinguished service in the Deccan. By 1622, Jahangir had brought Malik Ambar to heel patched up the long drawn-out tussle with Mewar and pacified Bengal. Jahangir was still fairly young, 51, and a long era of peace seemed to be ahead. But the situation was changed radically by two developments: the Persian conquest of Kandahar, which was a blow to Ighal prestige, and the growing failure of Jahangir's health, which unleashed the latent struggle for succession among the princes and led to jockeying for power by nobles. These developments pitchforked Nur Jahan into the political arena. The Jagir system in its standard form worked with tolerable efficiency down to the system in its standard form worked with tolerable efficiency down to the middle of Aurangzeb's reign, 1069 to the present, 1118/1659-1707. But towards the close of that reign, owing to the increasing strain of the Deccan Wars on the financial resources of the empire and the dislocation of the administration, owing to the emperor's absence from northern India, the complicated machinery under which Jagirs were assigned began to be weakened. The crises which shook the Jagir system appeared in the garb of what a contemporary writer called Bhai Diagir, absence of Jagir. More commanders and officers had to be accommodated on the imperial payrolls than could be found Jagirs. Inevitably, influence and money began to count more in all Jagir assignments. The Mughal nobility was theoretically the creation of the emperor. It was he alone who could confer, increase, diminish, or resume the mansab of any of his subjects. It would be wrong, however, to suppose that the Mughal nobility was open to all who could fulfill certain criteria of merit and competence to the satisfaction of the emperor. The mansabdars were not only public servants, but also the richest class in the empire and a closed aristocracy. Entrance into this class was not easily available to ordinary subject, whatever their merits. The most important factor, which was the heredity, the Kanazads, or sons and descendants of mansabdars, had the best claim of all. But sons did not normally succeed to the full mansabs of their fathers. As a result, a large portion of recruits always consisted of persons who did not belong to families of those already holding mansabs. Such persons came from a variety of classes. A number of them were zamindars or chiefs within the empire. The inclusion of zamindars among the officers of the state was no innovation of the Mughals, but it is true that a large number of zamindars, preeminently the Rajput chiefs, their ancestral domains were left to them, being treated as their watan, jagirs. But as government officers, ordinary jagir were assigned to them in all parts of the empire. There were nobles and high officers of other states who were given a place in the Mughal nobility on account of their experience, status, and influence, or of the contingents which they commanded and the territories which they controlled. For the Persian and Uzbek nobility, India had traditionally been on El Dorado, where fortunes could be rapidly made in the Deccan. Military necessity required that the large number of nobles and officers of the independent states, both in times of peace and war, be owned over to the Mughal side. They had to be granted mansabs high enough to induce them to betray their own states. Almost all, the Deccani mansabdars, for example, Bijapuris, Hyderabadis or Marathas belonged to this category. A small portion of the Mughal nobility was recruited from those who had no claims to high birth, but were pure administrator or accountants. Such were the members of the castes of Khatris, Kayasts, Nagar Brahmins, etc. Finally, mansab were also awarded to scholars, religious divines, men of letters, etc. Abul Fadi in the time of Akbar and said Allah. Khan and Danishmand Khan during the reign of Shah Jahan owed their high ranks to their talents as men of letters. A few theologians and religious scholars were also awarded mansabs. The various elements were incorporated into the Mughal service largely as a result of historical circumstances, but partly also as a result of planned imperial policy. Akbar's policy seems to have been to integrate all these elements into a single imperial service. He often assigned officers belonging to various groups to serve under one superior officer. At the same time, the district or separate character of each group was respected. Akbar's policy of sulh-i-kul, universal peace, was at least partly motivated by a desire to employ elements of diverse religious beliefs, Sunnis, Shias, and Hindus, and to prevent sectarian differences among them from interfering with their loyalty to the throne. From a close scrutiny of the sources, it is clear that a marked expansion of the nobility did not take place till Aurangzeb embarked on the policy of annexing the entire Deccan. As a result of fresh recruitment made during this period, the internal composition of the nobility changed in same material respects.